Welcome to you all. I'm Chantal Bernier. I am counsel with Dentons Canada. I'm a member of Crime Prevention Ottawa, and I'm president of the International Crime Prevention Centre, which is a charity organization that my law firm, Dentons Canada, has accepted within its pro bono program. So you put all this together, you can imagine how excited I am to be here this morning. Et j'espère que c'est la même chose pour vous. En fait, ça devrait être la même chose pour vous parce que nous avons vraiment un panel exceptionnel. Not only do we have experts, but we have complementary experts. That's what struck me when I read the panel we had this morning, is that we have experts from academia, we have experts from the operators, I will call them, and you have experts from the policy-making area. So this is the complete picture. J'espère que donc nous aurons une excellente séance. Sans plus tarder, je vais demander au conseiller Jeff Lipner de nous souhaiter la bienvenue à l'Hôtel de Ville.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to City Hall. Bienvenue à l'Hôtel de Ville. My name is Jeff Leeper. I'm the City Councillor for Kitchissippi Ward, and for the last year or so, it's been my real privilege to serve with the Crime Prevention Ottawa Board. Nancy and her team are doing incredible work here in Ottawa, and I have to admit, it has been a steep learning curve for me. As I take a look, for example, in the headlines this morning, you know, crime has a real impact in this city, and it's tempting not to go much beyond the headlines. But I think events like this morning's here at City Hall, in which I know Crime Prevention Ottawa has played a big role in helping to organize, are really important for folks like myself who don't have necessarily that really in-depth, rich understanding of some of the root causes of crime to begin to learn. It's something that I don't think we're ever going to have a full handle on. There is always more learning to be done, and I am grateful to Nancy and her team that they give us the opportunity to continue to do that. We have a wonderful panel this morning. I can't wait to hear from Dr. Farrington. Welcome again to City Hall, and enjoy the panel, and I hope this is of substantial use to you in your own work leaving here today. Thank you.
I will now ask the representative from Public Safety Canada, Patrick Boucher, who is Director General of the Community Safety Branch and Countering Crime Branch. And I just have to underline this. I used to be Assistant Deputy Minister precisely for that branch, except it was called Community Safety and Community Partnerships. So I don't know, I guess there's been somewhere an ideological shift since then. I just thought it was just too telling not to underline. Je veux aussi mentionner que, Patrick, vous connaissez la situation en ce moment. Le ministère de la Sécurité publique a des défis très importants, des défis humanitaires importants. Donc, Patrick, malheureusement, va devoir nous quitter après son allocution. Patrick?
Merci, Chantal. And of course, partnerships are at the center of everything we do. Thank you very much, Chantal, and thank you to the Crime Prevention Ottawa for organizing this speaker series on Lifecycle of Crime, Learning for Experts. Public Safety Canada is a proud co-sponsor for this event, and it is my pleasure to be here, as Chantal mentioned, on behalf of the Department of Public Safety. I would like to thank the City of Ottawa for their planning of this event in order to provide all of us with the opportunity to hear from the experts and practitioners working in the field of crime prevention and community safety. Also, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge the contribution of our research division within my branch for their support and assistance with this learning event. I must say that the mission of Public Safety Canada is to build a safe and resilient Canada, and as such, the department is currently undertaking work to better understand the issues of youth crime and community safety from different perspectives across various activity areas. This involves the creation and dissemination of knowledge that can be used to support the development of evidence-based crime prevention policy options and investments, and to deliver effective crime prevention programming. Evidence really helps us to implement effective prevention programs and services for youth and young adults to prevent them from getting involved in the criminal justice system in the first place, and unfortunately, if they do become involved, to ensure that the most appropriate response is put in place. On several occasions in the past, we've had the opportunity to hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. David Farrington, who has been invited and has made presentations to Public Safety Canada on the topic of juvenile delinquency and the life cycle of crime. We are pleased to be able to facilitate an opportunity for Dr. Farrington to share his knowledge and expertise on preventing the transition from juvenile delinquency to adult offending with a wider audience. As such, this event is a great opportunity for all of us to learn more about these important issues and to increase our knowledge on crime prevention and criminal justice issues. I wish you all a wonderful event. Thank you.
To mention before we go into the main presentation that you can follow the event on hashtag CPO event, and so that you'll be able to look at the tweet streamlined of the event. Dr. Farrington, like every impressive person, has a very long resume. And so last night I was reading it and I thought, oh my God, it's so long. You know, I just find it so choppy when the moderator leads these long biographies. So I saw this morning and I said, what do you feel is most important for me to share about you with the audience? And this is what he's come up with. He's very modest. He's really taken out a lot of stuff. But there are some things you really should know. Évidemment, d'abord et avant tout, son poste actuel. He is Emeritus Professor of Psychological Criminology at the Institute of Criminology at Cambridge University. Very, very important. The equivalent to the Nobel Prize for Criminology. He is the recipient of the Stockholm Prize in Criminology. Il a aussi travaillé au ministère lorsqu'il s'appelait le Solliciteur général du Canada. So he was for a year with Solgen working on Young Offenders Act. And he is the former president of the American Society of Criminology and the British Society of Criminology. That is all that he's left in his biography for me to share with you. Je pense d'ailleurs que juste à entendre le Dr. Farrington, on va pouvoir constater l'ampleur de son expertise. Dr. Farrington, may I ask you to then come to the podium? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It's always a pleasure to come to Ottawa, and I'm very grateful to Crime Prevention Ottawa and Public Safety Canada for arranging this event. I hope you'll all enjoy it and learn something from it. As Chantal said, I worked for the Solicitor General for a year, as a result of which I am the recipient of a very generous Canadian pension of $26 a month. So I am a Canadian pensioner. I'm going to talk today about preventing the transition from juvenile delinquency to adult crime. Can we have the next slide, please? And I'm going to talk about three topics. First of all, the conclusions of a US National Institute of Justice study group on transitions from juvenile delinquency to adult crime that I chaired with Rolf Lober. Secondly, I will talk about some effective interventions to prevent juvenile offenders continuing to offend into adulthood. And thirdly, I'll talk about policy implications. In particular, should there be special policies for young adult offenders? And I will argue that you should have special policies in Canada because nothing changes dramatically at the 18th birthday. Basically, young adult offenders from 18 to 25 share many of the characteristics of juvenile offenders, and they should be treated in similar ways. So I think in Canada there should be special provisions for young adult offenders. This is just showing the study group book that was published From Juvenile Delinquency to Adult Crime. So here are some of the key questions that we addressed in our study group. We were interested about persistence and desistance from offending between adolescence and early adulthood, and also the onset of offending during early adulthood, why it happened. Obviously, we're interested in what explains persistence from juvenile years to the adult years in offending, and what explains the onset of offending. We're interested also in the extent to which the criminal career mapped onto the change to the minimum age of adulthood, which was age 18 in most US states, and of course 18 in Canada. Again, we're interested in saying, does something really change at age 18? And actually the answer is no, it doesn't. And so that was our next question. To what extent can the minimum age for adult court of 18 be justified by reference to human development and its causes? We were very concerned with legal and judicial issues, such as whether the legal boundaries are really related to young people's development of cognitive control or lowered impulsivity, and as I mentioned already, whether there should be special provisions for young adult offenders. And we're very interested in the effectiveness of interventions, for example, family-based programs in childhood, the extent to which they can reduce offending during the young adult years. Also, how effective are interventions with older juvenile delinquents, ages 14 to 17, in preventing continuation into young adult offending. We're interested in other interventions, such as labour market interventions, and the relative effectiveness of the juvenile and criminal justice systems, because, of course, in Canada and in many US states, there's quite a lot of translation of juveniles into the adult criminal justice system, provisions for juveniles to be dealt with as adults. And we're very interested in financial benefits and costs in these straitened times. We'd like to know that interventions save more money than they cost, and we obviously want to have the most effective interventions, but also the most cost-effective interventions. We looked a lot at offending careers, particularly between ages 15 and 29. We concluded that the prevalence of offending generally peaks around age 15 to 19 and then decreases. The peak is later for more serious crimes such as violence. There's increasing seriousness of offences in the young adult years when you get more homicide, violence, drug dealing and gun carrying, but there's decreased specialisation in offending with age and decreased co-offending and no sharp change in offending patterns on the 18th birthday. So 18 is an arbitrary cut-off point. So I'll now talk a bit about possible explanatory factors for persistence. We considered individual differences in self-control. We know they change with age. Behavioural risk and protective factors, environmental risk and protective factors. We considered brain maturation and cognitive changes, mental illnesses and substance use, and the effects of life events such as getting married, becoming employed, and contextual changes including situational and neighbourhood context, basically moving, and also we focused on the justice response to offending. So this is to do with risk factors. We looked at a lot of predictors of reoffending by juvenile offenders, and we were helped by Bob Hogue, who was a member of our study group. Obviously, he's from Ottawa, and so he just shows some of the main predictors of reoffending based on the YLS-CMI, prior offending history, drug and alcohol abuse, having an aggressive antisocial attitude, high impulsivity and low empathy, we know are predictors, poor school performance, poor peer relations, low family income and poor housing, coming from a criminal family, and parental conflict and poor child rearing. These are important because these are risk factors that we can try and target in intervention programs to reduce the persistence of offending into the young adult years. We've concluded that the number of risk factors increases with age, and it's likely that early individual differences play a role in the later probability of offending in adolescence and early adulthood. But in addition to the individual factors, we have risk factors in several other domains, namely family, peer, school and neighbourhood areas, emerging a bit later in childhood and adolescence that strongly contribute to the later probability of offending. So we have a lot of risk factors that we know influence offending that we can target in programs. Brain maturation, we focused on this. As people get older, external controls by adults diminish, so parents supervise less as children get older and punish children less. And what happens is that you have internal controls increase as the external controls decrease. And we think, based on research, that the stop and think systems in the prefrontal cortex in most children mature, but they don't mature until before early adulthood. They're not fully mature at age 18. And we concluded from this that programs to improve self-control can be effective. Yes, we studied neural development, and we concluded that there were massive changes that supported the development of mature internal regulation of emotions and behavior. The next bit is a bit technical, talking about an increase in synaptic connections, followed by pruning and synaptic elimination. Basically, the brain functioning improves, but it doesn't stop at age 18. It continues well into the 20s. Behavioral expressions. This is just an example of where you find an improvement in functioning up to age 25 at least. This is a study by Larry Steinberg and others where they found that from age 10 to age 25 you had improvements in the ability to plan ahead, in future time perspectives, that's taking account of the future, and in the anticipation of future consequences. So when you do various psychological tests of brain functioning, you find that people are still maturing at least up to age 25. Life transitions. We believe that successful transitions to normative adult roles are important in decreasing offending, particularly in early adulthood. And as the slide indicates, the period between adolescence and early adulthood is a time when major life transitions occur. People leave school, they get a job, they may start studies, they may have a stable, intimate relationship, although this doesn't seem to happen until after age 30 these days. They may leave home and they may move to another type of neighborhood. Actually, what's happened in the last 20 years is that adolescence has extended to age 30, because now many young people are still living with their parents up to age 30, whereas 20 or 30 years ago, people would be living independent lives in their early 20s. They would have a job, they would have a relationship, and they would be self-sufficient. Now they're not self-sufficient until 10 years later. So it seems almost as though adolescence is continuing up to age 30, and we should pay attention to this in the way that we deal with our young adult offenders, because they're no longer mature offenders as they might have been 20 or 30 years ago. They're much more immature offenders. Research findings indicate that successful transitions to adult roles in marriage, parenthood, employment, moving to a new neighborhood can reduce offending in adolescence and early adulthood, and also evidence that improving employability of young people can cause significant reductions in offending. So effective programs. This is the second topic. Let's say the first topic was summarizing some of the main conclusions from our study group. Second topic is to tell you a bit about effective programs for juvenile offenders. Basically, telling us about the programs that prevent juvenile offenders continuing into the adult years. And I've particularly reviewed the work of Mark Lipsey in 2009, because this is the best summary of programs. Mark Lipsey reviewed 361 research reports that reviewed an intervention delivered to juveniles aged between 12 and 21, well, not all juveniles, but young people aged 12 to 21, that were intended to have desirable effects on their subsequent delinquency. Positive effects does not mean increasing delinquency, it means desirable effects. Also, there had to be quantitative results reported for a comparison between a treatment condition and a control condition, and a delinquency outcome measure. And also, in this review, the study had to be conducted in an English-speaking country and reported in English, so it didn't cover other studies. More than 90% of the studies were conducted in the United States, and the main outcome measure was the percentage of juveniles rearrested during 12 months after the intervention. Lipsey divided all these 360 reports into six broad types of interventions, and I'll explain what they are shortly. Surveillance interventions, deterrence, and disciplinary interventions. Those three are not very effective, whereas the restorative, counseling, and skill-building interventions, they were effective in reducing offending. And basically what the percentages show, it shows the average reductions in recidivism from a 50% rate, which is quite common. So you'll see the last three, restorative, counseling, and skill-building interventions, reduce recidivism from 50% to 40% or less. And this is realistically the best that we can hope for in many studies, but it's very effective. And certainly if we translate this into a number of offences saved or a number of victims saved, it's very significant. So the first type of interventions, broadly included as surveillance interventions. They're based on the idea that closer monitoring of the juvenile will inhibit reoffending. The main program is intensive probation or intensive parole, orientated towards increasing the level of contact and supervision. These programs often include additional services, but the surveillance component refers to the monitoring. These programs are not very effective, according to Lipsy's review. Then we have deterrent programs, dramatizing the negative effects of consequences of the behavior. The main program of this sort is a prison visiting program called Scared Straight, where juvenile offenders are exposed to prisoners who graphically describe the horrible nature of prison conditions to try to put them off offending. However, many experiments show that this program actually is harmful. The juveniles offend more after receiving Scared Straight than a control group of juveniles who don't receive it. And this is what a systematic review by Petrosino shows. So this program is actually harmful rather than ineffective. Then we have the disciplinary programs, where the idea is that juveniles must learn discipline to avoid reoffending. They have to have a structured regime. And the main types of programs are boot camps. Again, these are not effective. There was a systematic review by McKenzie which showed that boot camps generally are ineffective, but if they're combined with other types of treatment, such as cognitive behavioral treatment, they can be effective. Now we come to the first group of effective programs, the restorative programs. These programs try to get the juvenile to compensate to the victims or make some reparation via community service. There may also be direct reconciliation between victims and offenders. And there's two main intervention types: restitution, where there's financial compensation or community service, and mediation, where there's apologizing to victims, meeting with victims under supervision. And these may also include restitution. These programs generally are quite effective, the first effective group of programs. Counseling programs. Again, some of these programs are effective, especially mentoring. I think the evidence shows that mentoring is a very effective program, most effective really of these sorts of programs. But you have a number of different individual, family, group counseling programs that are effective. Peer programs don't seem to be so effective, and mixed programs sometimes come out as effective. But again, this is generally an effective group of programs, especially mentoring. And then we have the skill-building programs, where you have instruction, practice, incentives, and other activities aimed to develop skills that will help juveniles control their behavior and participate in normative pro-social activities, including behavioral programs, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very effective, social skills training is effective, challenge programs, academic training, job-related interventions. Again, these types of skill-building programs are effective. So what we've learned is that some types of programs are effective, some types of programs are ineffective or even harmful. Then we have a number of well-developed brand name programs, which I thought I'd just mention these 5: reasoning and rehabilitation, treatment foster care, functional family therapy, multisystemic therapy, and stop now and plan. So the reasoning and rehabilitation was developed by Robert Ross in Ontario, and it's trying to teach offenders to stop and think, trying to teach offenders to negotiate, how to respond to criticism, how to apologize, how to analyze interpersonal problems, how to consider various desirable options, to have critical reasoning, social perspective taking, to see the other person's viewpoint, to care about victims, to increase their empathy, and to have emotional control and anger management. So all this package of interventions are effective. I reviewed all the evaluations of reasoning and rehabilitation in 2008, and we found it was effective, especially when given in the community, more so than in the institutions. Treatment foster care also is an effective program. This is where you pay foster parents to look after delinquents, and the foster parents are trained to use behavior management methods to provide boys, usually with a structured daily living environment with close supervision and clear rules and limits. Again, a big effort is made to limit contact with other delinquent peers. And I just mentioned here the original evaluation of this program with chronic male delinquents, and the control group was boys in group homes, and the treatment foster care boys had lower official and self-reported delinquency in a one-year follow-up. But again, one swallow doesn't make a summer, and there are many other evaluations of this program which have been reviewed by MacDonald and Turner and show that it is effective in reducing recidivism. Another effective program is functional family therapy, trying to change family contingencies to increase positive and decrease negative behavior, to modify family communication patterns, to be more reciprocal, consider alternative solutions to problems. Again, I mentioned the original evaluation, which showed that functional family therapy was effective in reducing offending, but again, we've had a lot of other evaluations showing this. Scott Hengeler, Multisystemic Therapy, another effective program, family intervention to promote the parent's ability to monitor and discipline the adolescent. Also includes peer interventions to encourage pro-social friends, school interventions to enhance competence, and work generally with the family, the peer, and the school, not so much with the youth. Again, I mentioned one of the evaluations, of which there are many, because this is an interesting one, because there's a 23-year follow-up. Serious delinquents randomly assigned to multisystemic therapy or individual therapy, and Sawyer and Borduin followed up to age 37 and showed that the MST group had fewer felony arrests, 33% versus 55%, and fewer years incarcerated. So it saved a lot of money, and we have systematic reviews showing that this is effective. Then I thought I'd particularly focus on Lena Orji-Mary's program in Toronto, because I've worked on this myself. This is a program targeting boys aged 6 to 11 referred by police, based on skills training, problem solving, self-control, anger management, aiming to control impulsiveness. The program's called SNAP, which stands for Stop, Now and Plan. So the boys are trained to snap their fingers when they're feeling angry, calm down, take deep breaths, count to 10, then use coping statements, think what to do, to remain calm, say to themselves, this is hard, but I can do it, and plan effective solutions to interpersonal problems. It's a 12-week program. Groups of about 7 children meet for 90 minutes with a facilitator, and there's social skills, self-control, group discussion, modeling, behavioral rehearsal, role-playing, relaxation training, home practice exercises, and you have topics such as how to deal with anger, how to avoid trouble, how to deal with peer pressure, how to apologize, and also how to stop stealing. An evaluation by Chris Kogel and others showed that it was effective, and there are 2 independent evaluations by Ellen Lippman in Hamilton, Ontario, and Burke and Lober in Pittsburgh, which show that it's effective. I, with Chris Kogel, did a cost-benefit analysis of this program, which was published this year. We found that the program costs 4,641 Canadian dollars per boy on average in 2012 dollars. The effect size was between 0.2 and 0.4. That translated into an 18% to 33% decrease in offending. Our estimates had a range because the 0.4 was the immediate effect, the 0.2 was the long-term effect. And we estimated that the program saved between 1.25 and 2.29 convictions per boy between ages 12 and 20, which translated into saving $14,000 to $26,000 per boy when we took account of the types of offences that were saved, and we also had to discount because the savings were some years after the program. And so we came up with a benefit to cost ratio between 3 to 1 and 5.6 to 1. But convictions, we know, are only the tip of the iceberg of offending. So when we applied what we knew about the relationship between self-reported offending and convictions, we massively increased the benefit to cost ratio to 26 to 1 to 47 to 1. These are staggering figures suggesting that for every dollar you invest in this program, you save at least $26, at least if you believe self-reported offending, or you save at least $3 based on convictions. I thought I'd mention programs targeted on gangs because I was told there's a great interest in Ottawa in gang reduction programs. These are the 3 programs which I think have some evidence that they're effective. Gang resistance education and training programs. This is a school program, so it's a primary prevention program on the dangers of gang involvement which includes cognitive behavioral therapy, social skills, refusal skills, conflict resolution. Aggression replacement training is typically with older delinquents. It's a 10-week program including anger control and moral reasoning. And what's now called cure violence. You have violence interrupters working on the streets to prevent conflicts becoming violent, changing community norms and working with high-risk individuals. So we have some effective gang programs, and these are 3 of the best. Now we come to the final topic of policy recommendations. We start off by saying, why do we have special treatment for juvenile offenders? And there are many good reasons for this, because juveniles, we know, have less mature judgment, poorer decision-making, poorer executive functioning and reasoning and abstract thinking and planning. We know they're more influenced by immediate desirable consequences than longer-term, possibly undesirable consequences. We know that they have poorer impulse control, they're more likely to take risks, they tend to commit crimes for excitement rather than according to a rational choice. They're less set in their offending habits, more changeable. They're less culpable or blameworthy. They have diminished responsibility. They deserve punishment less. They have poorer self-regulation and emotion regulation. They have lower adjudicative competence to communicate with lawyers and make legal decisions, and they're more susceptible to peer influences. So actually we know that young adult offenders are rather similar to juvenile offenders in many of these ways, and therefore we recommended that there should be special courts for young adult offenders that might be established on an experimental basis with a focus on rehabilitation rather than retribution. We also know that juveniles who are transferred to adult courts tend to receive more severe sentences and tend to have higher recidivism rates. So we expect that these special courts would cause a decrease in recidivism and a decrease in incarceration, and also we thought they'd save money. We also thought there should be special correctional facilities for young adult offenders, including programs such as cognitive behavioral therapy, drug treatment, restorative justice, mentoring, education and vocational training, and work release programs. And we know there are special facilities for young adults in some states, such as Pennsylvania, but usually once you're 18, you're all together, which is we thought was highly undesirable. And we know that juveniles sent to adult correctional facilities have higher recidivism rates than those in juvenile facilities. Therefore, we thought that the special facilities would cause a decrease in recidivism and again save money, even taking account of the cost of special programs. We also thought there might be a youth discount for young adult offenders, a decrease in the severity of their penalties to take account of their juvenile-like lesser culpability and diminished responsibility. And this is a more specific to the US recommendation. We recommended death sentences and life without parole should be abolished for young adult offenders. We also recommended there should be risk, needs and maturity assessments and screening of young adult offenders to guide the selection of appropriate disposals. Again, there's a lot of assessment of juveniles, but very little assessment once people are 18. And we thought that young adult offenders with substance use problems should be diverted to drug courts, and those with mental health problems should be dealt with by mental health professionals. We thought there should be evidence-based programs for young adult offenders in the community and after release, including multisystemic therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, drug treatment, restorative justice, mentoring, educational and vocational training programs, and communities that care, which I don't want to talk about today. Employment and relationship programs we thought were desirable, and other programs to reduce what we call disorderly transitions, such as not graduating from high school and single teenage parenthood. And also we thought other useful programs were those that tried to reduce opportunities for offending, such as hotspots policing, situational crime prevention, and programs aiming to reduce gang membership and drug dealing targeted on high crime neighborhoods. So our conclusions. We concluded that the evidence, especially from developmental and neuroscience, suggests that in many respects, young adult offenders aged 18 to 25 are more similar to juveniles than to adults in individual factors such as executive functioning, maturity, impulse control, risk-taking and decision-making focused on immediate rather than future consequences. However, we felt that there was a great need to develop screening instruments that measured brain maturation and executive functioning. Again, we thought a policy option was to increase the minimum age for adult court from 18 to 21 or older. And interestingly, there was a a Dutch study group on the same topic, also chaired by Rolf Lober, and as a result of the Dutch study group, in 2014, the Netherlands increased the minimum age of adult court to 23, so our mirror image study group had a big impact in the Netherlands. So we believe that our recommendations offer more hope and more crime reduction and financial benefits than does the implementation of longer prison sentences for young adults in the adult criminal justice system. We urge the US federal government to develop an action plan to implement our key recommendations to assist states in changing statutes and practices so that justice is applied more fairly and with more knowledge of how youth develop into mature adults. We thought that these initiatives should be rigorously evaluated and that cost-benefit analyses should be carried out. It was important to study age, gender, and racial and ethnic differences in the effectiveness of programs. Interestingly, our report is having some effect. In September 2015, a National Institute of Justice report on new thinking in community corrections was launched in the Great Hall of Justice in Washington, D.C., proposing new ways of dealing with young adult offenders aged 18 to 24. So I think the US is already moving towards that, and we believe that our recommendations about young adult offenders are relevant to Canada. I think that Canada should also have special treatment for young adult offenders aged about 18 to 25. I think this will be more effective in reducing offending, in preventing victimization, and in dealing with young people in more appropriate ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Probably you're like me, you have a ton of questions. However, we have 3 speakers that I would like to invite up front. They will make their comments, and after that, we will open the discussion. So please come to this table. I'm going to very quickly again tell you who's coming. I'm going to invite, first of all, Gord Boyd. I've also succinctly reduced his resume. He is the Director of Youth Justice Services for the Youth Services Bureau of Ottawa. Please come and join us. Send them all up. Omar Al-Attab is the team lead for the Youth Ottawa Outreach Worker team. And he's been with the Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa since 2003 and the Robert Smart Centre as a youth counsellor. Andrew Buchan is staff sergeant in charge of youth section at the Ottawa Police Service, which is made up of youth diversion officers and school resource officers. Alors, comme vous voyez, l'éventail dont j'ai parlé tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire du point de vue universitaire que nous a fourni le docteur Farrington, très concret, ceci étant dit, je vais maintenant demander à nos panélistes, l'un après l'autre, de discuter, de commenter la présentation qu'on vient de recevoir. And according to the scenario I've been given, so this is not my choice, but according to the scenario, I will ask Gord Boyd to go first.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out so early in the morning and joining us. I'm inspired by the conversation this morning for a number of reasons. So my day job, which I do, is I oversee residential custody and detention programs for the Youth Services Bureau. And having done that for a number of years, I've seen a number of changes. So when I first started in the field, we used to call them remand centers. And they were there, they were detained with I'll call it the good feel approach. Okay? Because at that time, we didn't talk about best practices. We didn't talk about the research and the academic commitment and implementations behind the things we do. So I can tell you right now, in Ottawa, the services, we do use a cognitive behavioral foundation. We do use skill development programs. A few years ago, if you had asked me how many kids graduated or even got school credits, I couldn't tell you because we didn't count them because the kids weren't there long enough in order to succeed getting a school credit. I can tell you right now, and I looked at the board yesterday, there's 845 school credits given since we counted just a couple of years ago, as well as 15 graduates from high school have come out of our custody programs here in Ottawa. And when we do that, we celebrate. They have the gown, they have the hat, they do it all, okay? Because Really, if you're going to measure the pathway to success for young people, it is truly about how they feel, their perceptions at the end of the day. I want to talk a little bit about the skill development program, because I only have a few minutes. A few years ago, we decided that we should be able to work with young people. We should connect them to jobs, job readiness programs, community folks. And we started the idea that we'd build a little shed with the cooperation of the community who got right behind this little shed. We're going to fix some lawnmowers. What you're looking at behind me is a 4,000 square foot Tamarack Trades Training Center that was built on the secure custody site here in Ottawa. The chairs that you're seeing and the pieces of, so you're seeing a shed actually being built there for one of my other programs, but they're being done by the young people in custody. They're getting school credits, they're earning skills, confidence. They're also earning in the trade center the confidence and the comfort of working in any trade center. We went to the post-secondary educators, the colleges, and we said, if we put a graduate of ours into your program, what do they need to know? You know what they told? I was thinking it was going to be math, it was going to be all types of things. Post-secondary educator said, don't worry about that. If a young person, any young person can stay in a trade center for the first 6 weeks, be comfortable in that environment, be oriented, and start to work with the idea that they can have success, we can do the rest. So that's what the Tamarack Trades Training Center does. It's pre-job readiness skills. I happened to notice that my youth employment counselor walked into the room, and I need to indicate, you can't do this without attaching hope for young people. And not all our young people come to us with a whole lot of hope in their kit bag, okay? But when they start to work in trade centers, when they start to work and sit down with our youth employment counselor and do job readiness skills, do the interviews, do the resumes, do the job applications, we've been very, very successful in helping young people. All thanks to folks in the academic world who told us that's what we need to do. In terms of some of the movement forward, we're very, very pleased that our connection with the community, now we have employers coming to us and saying, hey, how do we work with you? How can we pick up one young person at a time coming out of your facility with a keen interest, keen commitment, and maybe we can do co-op, maybe we can do apprenticeship, maybe as a community we can get behind some action. Fairly important, critical piece for a young person coming out, because as already cited, we talk about housing, we talk about poverty, we talk about some of the issues that create young people very quickly when they leave custody, going back to the community, falling back into some of the shortcomings that they came from, some of the poor decisions that they were making. But here's an opportunity for them to move forward, have connection, start to work under apprenticeships, or pre-apprenticeships, because sometimes it's not about, they're not going to be auto mechanics necessarily, or electricians, but they may be able to make enough money at an entry-level job that they can now set up, pay their rent, make good choices for themselves, and move forward. The only thing else I'll say is you can't do this without having fun with young people. I've been in the field for a while, okay? And you got to have fun, okay? You've got to motivate them differently, because if you just think you're going to have young people who haven't had success walk into these types of structures without support and having fun and getting engaged and motivating them, that's why you need those young youth workers. You need the youth workers who are going to spend time, be respectful, work with them. Not only in my facility, and I see some colleagues in the audience, John Howard Society, certainly the support there, the Boys and Girls Club, UCAN, I see a number of members in the audience. Because when young people leave custody facilities, they have to have the support to integrate back in, transition back into the community. They need that support. So there's my challenge for us. We've got the residential stuff going. I think we've got the foundation moving ahead, but the real work is how we connect the folks' community supports in a preventive way, in a diverse way, in terms of changing the way young people feel about support. It's not too long ago, some young people left and they didn't know where they were going to be housed the next day. Now we already make applications for housing. We do it right in the process when they're with us. That's what we need to do more. But we need to break down the barriers of our supports in the community. If we do that, we have a better chance of making pathways for success for young people in our community. And I'm not talking about 15-year-olds. I'm talking about 20-year-olds. I'm talking about young men who can go out and meaningfully start to move forward. I think I said enough. I think you got my message. Thank you.
Thanks for showing me how to turn the mic on. Good morning. If I knew I was sitting down, I would have invested in a nicer shirt, but that's fine. I'm honestly extremely honored to be part of this panel, looking to my right and my left, and I'm thankful to have this opportunity to speak and say a little bit about the YOW program. I'm looking around the room and I notice all the experts are sitting over there. So when I was asked about a month ago to speak, I thought about what can I say, to leave you in a good sense, to understand what we do, how we do it, the type of youth that we work with, and some of the interventions. So I did come up with a little structure, and I'll try to follow my own structure here. So YOW stands for Youth Outreach Workers. This is a provincially funded program by the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, and here in Ottawa, we operate under the Boys and Girls Club. So we're mandated to connect youth to services through outreaching. So outreaching to at-risk youth, at-risk communities, while working through our stages of change model. So trying to help increase their protective factors, decrease the risk factors, and work through positive change through the line of stages of change. Nice mandate, but how do we do that? So 4 points that I'm going to talk about. Number 1 being, that Ashley Gore touched a bit about, is relationship building. So investing our time in building relationships with the youth, that's the most important aspect of the work that we do. Without a solid foundation of a relationship, we're not going to get to any great results of our interventions. The way I look at it was simply explained to me a long time ago. Right, you open up a bank account. If you want to pay your rent, you got to start putting money in your bank account. Groceries, you got to put more money in your bank account. You have a youth. You want to do some work, you got to invest your time. So time in this situation is the money in the bank. So you got to keep putting your time in it, building that relationship. So when a situation does happen, when there is a crisis, when there's a concern that you need to address, well, guess what? You invested your time. You can start withdrawing from that. And that's something that I try to do in my day and in my work, is invest my time into building that. I mean, when you think about your teachers and coaches back in high school, the ones that you remember, the ones that you felt that you belonged to and you really enjoyed, is the ones that you had a good, strong relation with that teacher, with that coach, with that youth worker. So that's something to look at. Number 2 is what we touched based on, is outreaching. So outreaching to at-risk youth and at-risk communities. We're trying to get to the youth that are not connected. So they're not connected to multiple different programs. They're probably the ones that are not doing well in school, if they're in school. Falling through the gaps, and then the transitional age that Dr. Farrington touched based on, so the 18, 19, 20, so they're no longer considered youth, and now they're adults in our system, and we know that the services completely change. So that's the type of youth that we try to connect to while we're outreaching, and more in detail, street outreaching. We had a young lady referred to us by the Ottawa Police. Before this lady was referred to us, they tried to refer to different service providers, but she rejected that, and she did not want to do any work. Based on she did not know them, she did not have any relationship with them or contact. So a YOW worker and an officer knocked on the door. The young lady opens the door. YOW worker does not know this girl yet, but this girl happened to recognize her and says, "Hey, I know you." Conversation continues on. You find out that she knew her because she saw the YOW worker outreaching in the community, in the park, and talking to her friends. So she knew her through her friends. She agreed to do some work, and in this case, they did some really good work. But how did that happen? It happened because this young lady felt that she had a connection to the YOW worker through her friends. She valued their opinion, obviously. She said, if my friends are okay with you, I'm okay with you. Which touches back to my first point, relationships. Because there was somewhat of a connection, she agreed to do some work. through outreach, that connection happened. A point that stands out, and I know my supervisor says that to us quite often, is that when you're outreaching and you're connecting with youth, you might be connecting with other youth that you don't know you connected with at that time, which what I just explained. Third point I'm touching on is ongoing case management. So luckily for us in our program, we don't officially have to close any files. We meet the kid, we meet the family, and they're with us as long as they're around, as long as they agree to continue working with us, as long as we continue seeing them in the communities that they live in and when we work in. We do have some files that have timelines that we have to close, so some of our files that come from diversion, and those files, we have to meet the timeline within 3 months, within 4 months, and close them and send them, that's what we do with diversion. But with us, we continue that relationship, that working relationship, if the client does agree to continue doing that. I have a young man, who's about 21 now, been working with him for 6 years. When I first started working with him, it was all about employment, right? We got him a job at the pizza store, he's no longer there. Got him a job at the movies, he's no longer there. And the corner store, and he's no longer there. He can't keep a job. I ran into him in outreach and said, hey, what's going on? What's happening? Why do you keep leaving these jobs? And this is the words that he was using. You can tell he was used to a lot of service providers and the words. He says, Omar, I've exhausted all my resources in the west end of Ottawa. I need a job in the east. And I'm not lying, this is what he said. So yeah, it's so funny, it's funny at the time. But smart, he's really smart, because find out what the real problem was, is that when he was working at the pizza store, his friends from the neighborhood would come, and they want free pizza. And yeah, he gives them free pizza. They come to the movies, they want to get them for free. Of course, it's his boys, he's gonna let them in for free. So he got fired from the pizza store, got fired from there, and to him is, if I go work in the East, my friends are not there. Smart. When you look at the risk assessment and all the tools that we have, this is more issues than just employment, right? He did not care that what he was doing was illegal. What mattered to him is when he went back to the community, when he went back to his friends, he still belonged. So the notion of him, this is what I gotta do to be accepted, is what he was doing. Unfortunately, I'm still seeing this young man, but he's selling drugs now. So why do I share a story? You're like, oh, this is not a great intervention. Well, sure. But not everything that we do turns out to be great. And this is some stuff that we gotta work with. But what's great about the situation is that 6 years later, we're still seeing him. He's still open to us. We know what he's doing. He knows we know what he does. And when time does happen, maybe when he is 22, 25, when a situation changes in his life and he wants that help, we're there for it. A last one, because I'm going on too long here, is connecting youth to services. So for that to happen, we need to make referrals. And we try to stay away from making referrals for the sake of making referrals. They have to be meaningful referrals for the service provider, for the youth themselves. So how do we do that? I mean, we sit on a number of different tables, a number of different networks, and many people in this room sit on those tables, and we try to get to know what the programs are, and if that youth is going to fit. And every refer has to be customized to what the youth is. So some of them are simply okay with just getting an address and a phone number and going there. But others, you have to sit down and walk them through what it looks like when they walk into the building. Maybe you need to go with them, maybe you need to make the phone call with them or the email. So it has to change, your approach has to change within every single youth. It can't be all the same. It's not like math where every formula fits every single problem. With youth and with people, we're complex. So that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you.
I won't be too long. Again, I wanted to be up there today, but I ended up down here. So, and definitely not an expert, maybe a practitioner, but more like a manager of budgets and schedules and whatnot. But I think what we all kind of really are from the same page, and some of the folks in the audience, we've met and we've discussed these things, worked together. But from the Ottawa Police perspective, we have the youth section, which in general and real broad terms, takes an upstream view of a lot of this stuff. We try to get there at the front end, and better time, better resources spent early on. And that's what we do through our school resource officer program, where we have school police officers in the schools in the city, and working with the school teams to see if there's any risks that need to be looked at early on. our youth diversion crew. We have about 3 officers that look after that and work on lining up referrals to the Ottawa Boys and Girls Club and to Wabano for pre-charge diversion, something that we've been doing for quite a while and works very well. But we rely heavily on our partners who have the front-end expertise like Omar and Gord to know what the best fit is for the youth. A couple other little pieces we have. We have a relationship with Crossroads Mental Health for youth under 12. That's working out quite well for all of us, I think. We have a collaboration with the Youth Mental Health Court. We don't drive that. We contribute to it and support it. We have one of the big ones we're involved in is the Youth and Policing Initiative, the provincially funded employment piece that provides job experience for youth from challenging circumstances, neighborhoods, backgrounds, etc. And that's a real big plus for us. We enjoy it. We have officers that look forward to working with them for the summer and for the less so the after-school stuff that goes on. There's 2 separate programs. There's a summer one and there's an after-school one from December to April. The summer one, I've been there to the graduation, I think 3 times. I missed last year, and it's one of my favorite things to do is to go see them at the end when they've completed the program, and most of them want to stay. They wish the program would continue. And so you see a lot of pride in their accomplishments and their family's pride in what their child has accomplished. So it's, we're lucky to get to see the face of those programs and how they're successful. And it's really amazing to see what can happen with just a bit of opportunity and how far someone can fly with just a little bit of opportunity. And the mentoring too that goes along with that from our people and from the coordinators that are hired. And some of the youth coordinators that are involved in the YIPI, we call it the YIPI program, were themselves YIPI students. Mentoring is a big piece. I saw that in there. I know we talked about a week ago. I didn't notice it the first read through, but I noticed it now. It usually takes about 3 times to get stuff. So, but mentoring is huge, and it's something that came up at a conference. I don't know if any of you were at it. It was a strength-based conference. I think it was this year or last year? Last year. And young people themselves talking about how mentors were very, very important to them in getting them through the challenges that they had. And they mentioned a couple names. I think Sharmarki, his name was one of them. And where's my friend Mohammed? Is he back here somewhere? Yes, there he is. Mentors. And then the young people actually mentioned them by name, saying how important it was that those gentlemen were involved in their lives to help them through. One other little quick thing, the piece about 18 to 25, and I know when we talked about it, nothing keyed stuck in my head, but after I thought about it, we have a youth advisory committee at Ottawa Police. It's an initiative we had for about 3 years, and it involves youth up to the age of, or young adults up to the age of 24 that help the police in different ways to view their outreach and whatnot. So an example of that would be a robbery prevention program where we, rather than just go print off a bunch of posters and nail them up, we talk to the youth from the Youth Advisory Committee, and there's one of them here in the audience, Adam up there, he was in there. And again, these are young people from all the different areas, all the different communities, and some of them, again, not from easy circumstances, but what they show is a resiliency and a real strength to keep going on. And so we're glad to have them along with us. So they give us an approach, a way of looking at the world through their eyes, and it's very, very useful for us. So, and a recognition, at least from our perspective, that 18 to 24 is still, there's a connection there, there's a way of viewing the world that's still relevant to youth. But that's it for me. I want to save room for questions and whatnot, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. It is now time to close. First of all, I would like to congratulate Nancy Worsfold and her team for having put this panel together. I told you at the beginning that what had struck me when I had read the panelists' biographies was how complementary their expertise was. And I really have found that coming out tremendously this morning. And I'd like to hone on one specific point. Again, not at all, I assure you, partisan, rather for crime prevention. By telling you this little anecdote, last week I was in Calgary for work, and I was meeting business, and they asked me, what is the reaction in Ottawa to the elections? To which I said, oh, it's such a relief. To which they said, oh, well, of course, we all know that all the public servants in Ottawa are Liberals. To which I replied, because I was a public servant for 20-some years, so I know, I said, no, actually, look, there are in the top brass public service right now, there are people who were in Conservative cabinets, there are Liberals, there are NDP. Absolutely, that's not partisan. The one abyss between the public service and the politicians was the different approach to policy making, one being ideological, the other being evidence-based. And that is the opportunity to seize, and that is what we've had this morning. Every panelist has given us such cogent evidence that crime prevention is the right way. I wish to thank you for this really, really impressive presentation. Et à tous, merci d'être venus ce matin.